We begin with the dam-breaking and perhaps the most comprehensive criminal prosecution of the ex-president's alleged criminal enterprise, that plot to overturn the 2020 election. This morning in a courthouse in Atlanta, Georgia, Trump attorney, peddler of the big lie, and importantly, Trump co-defendant Sidney Powell pleaded guilty to 6 misdemeanor counts in that sprawling RICO case brought by Fulton County District Attorney Fani Willis. Here is that moment.
How do you plead to 5 counts of conspiracy to commit intentional interference with the performance of election duties and 1 count of conspiracy to commit criminal trespass? How do you plead to the 6 counts of conspiracy to commit intentional interference with performance of election duties?
Guilty.
Guilty. As part of that plea deal with prosecutors on the eve of what would have been the beginning of her trial alongside another Trump attorney, Kenneth Chesebro, Powell was sentenced to 6 years of probation for conspiracy to commit intentional interference of election duties, as you heard there. Now, as part of that deal, the New York Times reports this, quote, prosecutors said in court that Ms. Powell had given them a recorded statement on Wednesday. She has agreed to testify against any of the 17 remaining defendants. Powell has also agreed to turn over documents in her possession related to the case. It bears repeating, she has agreed to be a state witness and testify against any of the other 17 defendants in the case. That includes Rudy Giuliani, John Eastman, and the disgraced 4 times indicted ex-president himself. So that means that Powell's guilty plea could end up being a body blow to Trump's defense in the Fulton case, given her central role in many aspects of the coup plot. Powell was, of course, a bulwark of Team Crazy, the group of lawyers who took the reins of the Trump campaign in the post-election period. She was the architect of what she termed the Kraken, those 60-plus lawsuits in federal and state court. All of them failed except one. And she plotted to become special counsel and seize voting machines in a search for fraud, which, had it happened, would have marked a dangerous point of no return for our country. A watershed moment in the Fulton County election interference case, resulting in a former Trump attorney now in position to flip on the ex-president, is where we start today with some of our favorite reporters and friends. Atlanta Journal-Constitution political reporter Greg Bluestein is here. Also joining us, the former lead investigator for the January 6th Select Committee, Tim Heaphy. With me at the table, former top Justice Department official, MSNBC legal analyst Andrew Weissmann is with us. Greg Bluestein, I start with you. Sidney Powell had her hands on the coup-iest parts of the coup, right? Seizing voting machines and using the executive branch to do it, as well as the most Georgia parts of the coup. And that was this break-in in Coffee County. And what we still don't have a completely full picture of is the intersection of the two. Do you have any information about what she may have shared in that recorded statement?
We don't have any details of that recorded statement. We do know that prosecutors must have loved what they heard because they agreed to this plea deal. But look, I mean, this is someone who, as you mentioned, does stand at that intersection. It's hard to find a Donald Trump defender who promoted election fraud lies and pushed his false claims of that he won the Georgia election, quite like Sidney Powell. Now she stands from going from Donald Trump's chief legal warrior to someone who could be a star witness in the trial against him and who could give prosecutors access to those inner circle discussions that she had with members of Trump's legal team, with the former president himself. And of course, as you mentioned, her role down in Coffee County in rural Georgia, breaching that election data.
So, Tim, she seems to me as crazy as Mike Flynn, as hands-on as the other guy who pleaded guilty already for the Coffee County break-in, and as sort of maniacal as the Overstock guy in terms of using all the levers of power. Just tell us how important she is to this case and these still unanswered questions about January 6th.
Yeah, Nicole, look, I think she's potentially really important, but unclear whether she provides a linkage between what she's pleaded to and the former president or other senior members of Team Crazy. I think from my quick review of the plea is that she has pled to a misdemeanor's conspiracy to intentionally interfere with the performance of election duties related to that Coffee County access to ballots that happened on January 6th. There's really no evidence yet that links the former president or Giuliani or others to those series of events. Now, look, if has in her video statement or would testify publicly that was directed by the former president, or he was aware of it, or if she has more broad testimony, because she has a testimonial obligation about direct communications she had with the president about the presence or lack of evidence of election fraud, it could be really significant. But the plea alone, to me, until we see what she has said and what she will say, I'm not yet ready to say that it's the dam breaking or it's really significant. Significant symbolically that a senior member of the president's legal team is pleading guilty, but substantively, does it materially move forward the case in Georgia or in Washington with the special counsel? That really depends on what she says, and we still don't know that.
It's a really important distinction. What she's pleaded to and what the deal includes are 6 misdemeanors, and they don't get to, as far as what we've seen, the heart of Trump's role, which was the committee's focus in overturning and using the federal government, using all those levers of power to overturn his defeat. Let me, and I think Andrew Weissman shares your legal assessment of her potentially limited usefulness in understanding the broader plot. But let me just bring people back into the room with your questioning. It starts with your questioning of her. And this is around the December 18th Oval Office meeting and her association with Team Crazy.
How much time did you have alone with the president? And I say alone, you had other people with you, but
right
from his aides before the crowd came running?
Probably no more than 10 or 15 minutes.
Was in that...
I bet Pat Cipollone set a new land speed record.
I opened the door and I walked in. I saw General Flynn. I saw Sidney Powell sitting there. I was not happy to see the people in the Oval Office.
I was asking, like, you claiming the Democrats were working with Hugo Chavez, Venezuelans, and whomever else. And at one point, General Flynn took out a diagram that supposedly showed IP addresses all over the world.
I mean, at times there were people shouting at each other, hurling insults at each other. It wasn't just sort of people sitting around on the couch, like chit-chatting.
Cipollone and Hirschman and whoever the other guy was showed nothing but contempt and disdain of the president.
What response did you get when you asked Ms. Powell and her colleagues where's the...
A variety of responses based on my current recollection, including, can't believe you would say something, things like this, like, what do you mean, where's the evidence? You should know.
And, then there was discussion of, well, we don't have it now, but we will have it or whatever.
I mean, if it had been me sitting in his chair, I would have fired all of them that night and had them escorted out of the building.
But Derek and I both challenged what she was saying. And she says, well, the judges are corrupt. And I was like, everyone? Every single case that you've done in the country you guys lost, every one of them is corrupt, even the ones we appointed? I think that it got to the point where the screaming was completely out there. I mean, you got people walk in, it was late at night, it had been a long day, and what they were proposing, I thought was nuts.
I'm gonna categorically describe it as, you guys are not tough enough. Or maybe I put it another way, you're a bunch of excuse the expression, but I'm almost certain the word was used.
Our team had cut an 8-minute version, and it really is amazing. But I think, Tim Heaphy, the distinction you're making for us is that there's nothing in the plea deal that suggests that she spilled the beans on this, which she's sort of at the beating heart of this plot inside the Oval Office and then the residence to use the government to overturn the election.
Right. But look, she has a complete testimonial obligation as I read it. So she could be asked and has been asked and will be asked again to talk about the discussion during that December the 18th meeting? What was the basis on which you would be potentially appointed as special counsel to investigate election fraud? What was the basis by which the president had authority to seize voting machines? Those are the kind of extreme measures that were discussed at that meeting. So her firsthand account of what she told the president, what others told the president, directly bears upon his state of mind, which is, as we've discussed repeatedly, will be a central focus for Jack Smith. The other thing that's really important, Nicole, to remember is that right after that meeting, the middle of the night, after that meeting concludes, after midnight, is when January 6th is launched. The president goes back to the residence, and at 1:40 something in the morning is when he tweets, "Be there, big rally, big event on January 6th. Be there, will be wild." And we had so much testimony that was the spark. That was seen as an invitation, that people heeded that call as an invitation, and the energy around January 6th, the organizing around it, started then. So that meeting is really significant because it sort of leads to the president saying, all right, we got to play our final card, which is public opinion and ramping up energy directed at the joint session. So Powell could have a ton of information about all that. Who knows if she has provided it or if it will ultimately bear upon the case, because this is, again, a pretty limited set of facts to which she's pleaded guilty.
Andrew.